There's a scene you know by heart, even if you've never told anyone about it in detail. You're sitting at a table full of people who share your last name. Someone tells a joke. Everyone laughs a little too loudly. And for a second you feel that strange relief of being there, belonging to something. And then, without any warning, without any reason you can point to, the mood shifts. Someone makes a comment about you. Small, almost harmless if you were to tell a stranger. But your body already knows. Your body freezes a second before your mind understands why. You spend the rest of the night recalculating every word you said. Did I speak too loudly? Should I have stayed quiet when that person said that? You leave exhausted in a way no one else seems to be, as if you'd been working all night, when in reality you were just sitting at a table eating, and in the car, alone, comes the question you've asked yourself hundreds of times since you were a child. Why is it always me? This video isn't about giving you a pretty explanation so you can accept your place in the family. It's about showing you, with a clarity that might hurt a little, that the weight you've been carrying since long before you could choose isn't about who you are. It's about a role you were given without being asked. And before this video ends, you will understand exactly how this happened to you, and why the most painful part of this story might also be the most revealing part about who you truly are. You learned early on to police yourself before even stepping into a room, before ringing your parents' doorbell, before sitting on that specific couch. A part of you is already calculating how much of yourself you can allow to be in that space without becoming a problem. Most people don't live like this. Most people go to a family gathering thinking the worst that can happen is a boring topic, an uncle insisting on talking politics, a dragged-out conversation about traffic. For you, the calculation is different. You enter measuring how much of you fits into that space before someone decides, halfway through dessert, that you are the reason the evening felt heavy. And the cruelest part is that you learn to do this so well that almost no one notices. You smile at the right time. You agree with things you don't agree with. You let slide comments that, if said to anyone else at the table, would create an awkward silence. But when said to you, no one even notices, because it's already become far too familiar to bother anyone other than you. Some people who grow up this way develop a strange talent. The ability to feel the emotional temperature of a room before anyone else realizes it has changed. You feel the tension between two relatives before a single word is spoken. You know, just by the way someone puts their fork down on the plate, that an argument is 3 sentences away. This isn't a spiritual gift. It's a nervous system that was trained year after year to scan for danger before it reached you. And here is the contradiction you carry without realizing it. You developed this vigilance to protect yourself, but this vigilance is precisely what keeps you trapped. Because while you're busy predicting other people's reactions, calculating the risk of every sentence, shaping your presence to fit into a space that was never designed to welcome you whole, you aren't resting. You aren't being someone in a family. You are working a shift that never has an end. You might call this care, sensitivity, emotional intelligence, just being prudent. And in part, it is. But it's also a prison you build yourself every day, brick by brick, thinking you're protecting yourself, when in reality, you're just confirming to yourself that the place you occupy there is conditional, that the love you receive has a clause hidden in the fine print. There is a quote by Carl Jung that describes this exact kind of silent imprisonment. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You didn't choose to become this hyper-vigilant person, always one step ahead of everyone else's reaction. Something taught you to be this way, and until you understand what it was, you will keep thinking this is just your way of being, your fate, your personality, when in reality, it's a learned response to a very specific environment. There's a detail in this story that almost no one stops to examine: the way your achievements were received versus the way your mistakes were kept. Do you remember the last time you shared good news with your family and felt deep down a sort of disappointment at their reaction? A dry "that's nice," a quick subject change, a silence that should have been a celebration and wasn't. And at the same time, that mistake you made 10, 15 years ago still comes up in conversations, as if it happened last week, polished by time, retold with details even you don't remember anymore, almost like an inside joke that only works at your expense. This isn't a coincidence, nor is it conscious malice on anyone's part. It's a pattern. People who grow up being treated as the complicated one in the family learn, without realizing it, a dangerous lesson. That good news needs to be minimized before someone else minimizes it for you. You start to anticipate others' disappointment by turning down the volume of your own life. You tell good news with less enthusiasm than you actually feel. You police yourself not to seem arrogant or seeking attention. Words that, if you pay attention, you've probably heard about yourself before, even when all you were doing was existing with a little bit of shine. And there is yet a second layer to this same wound, perhaps the quietest of all, the feeling that your own memory isn't reliable. You remember a scene clearly, a specific sentence, a tone of voice, the way someone slammed the door on their way out. And when you bring it up, the response you get is always some variation of, "That's not how it happened," or "You always exaggerate things." After years of hearing this, a part of you learns to doubt your own perception before even opening your mouth. You start saving proof without realizing you're saving proof. A saved message, a noted date, a detail repeated mentally several times, just to be sure you weren't making it up. This isn't paranoia. It's what's left when someone spends their entire childhood being told that their own eyes can't be trusted. Here is the first thing I need you to understand, and it will probably contradict everything you've been told your whole life. What you've always called "I'm difficult" was never about you being difficult. It was about you being the only one who refused to pretend. Think of a family as an organism, not as a set of separate individuals, but as a single body with a shared nervous system. Any body, when it's malfunctioning, needs to do something with what it can't process. A healthy body digests, absorbs what it needs, and expels the rest. But a system that refuses to look at its own pain, an old secret, a grudge no one had the courage to resolve, a shame that spans generations, needs a place to put what it cannot digest. And here is the detail that changes everything. That place isn't chosen at random. It's chosen because someone, inside that system, cannot participate in the collective lie. Someone who feels too much to ignore the tension. Someone who is too honest to pretend everything is fine when it isn't. Someone who, in some way, acts as a mirror to what no one else wants to see. You weren't chosen because there was something wrong with you. You were chosen because there was something too right with you for that environment to absorb without reacting. Think of a family that could never talk openly about an unhappy marriage, a hidden addiction, a loss that was never truly grieved. That kind of silence doesn't disappear just because no one speaks of it. It has to go somewhere. And most of the time, it lands right on the person who, by temperament or sensitivity, is incapable of pretending they don't feel it hovering in the air. While everyone else learned to smile over the tension, you learned to feel it first, and within a system that depends on silence to stay standing, that was treated as a threat. Now let me show you why this hurts so much in the body, not just in the mind. Researchers like Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA spent years studying what happens in the brain when someone is excluded from a group, and what they found is almost disturbing. The regions of the brain that activate when you feel social rejection are, for the most part, the exact same regions that activate when you feel physical pain. Your brain doesn't make a clear distinction between "my family left me out of the conversation" and "I got hurt." To the brain, it's pain, real, measurable in the same way a burn is real. This means something very simple and very profound. You aren't exaggerating when that silence in the family group chat hurts physically. You aren't being too dramatic when you feel your chest tighten before stepping into a birthday party. Your body is reacting to a threat it learned, through repetition, to be real. And a body that learned to associate family presence with pain doesn't forget it just because someone told you to get over it. And there's another piece to this puzzle, one that almost no one tells you. Once a family decides that you are the difficult one, everything you do after that is filtered through that lens. Psychologists call this the fundamental attribution error, our tendency to explain someone's behavior by their personality rather than the situation they are in. If you raise your voice after being provoked for hours, no one sees the provocation. They only see your tone. And that moment becomes yet another piece of proof that you're just like that. When in reality, it was simply the last drop in a glass that had been filled for a long time by other hands. What you thought was a personality flaw, getting irritated easily, struggling to let it go, feeling like you're always one step behind explaining your own reactions, is actually the mark of a system that decided, long before you had any chance to defend yourself, what role you were going to play. And there is one last mechanism here that explains why this pattern is so hard to leave, even after you rationally understand what is happening. It's called conditioning. The same logic behind why a dog starts salivating, just hearing a sound that always came before food. Your body learned, through repetition, to associate being around family with feeling shame, tension, a tight chest. It doesn't matter how many times you repeat to yourself that this time will be different. The body doesn't listen to arguments. It listens to repetition. And after years of being repeatedly associated with discomfort, the mere idea of a family dinner already triggers the same alert reaction it triggered when you were 8 years old and didn't know yet that it had a name. That is why you can be in a healthy relationship, have friends who see you clearly, have built an entire life far away from that table, and yet, upon reading a message in the family chat announcing the next Sunday lunch, feel the same knot in your stomach as when you were 10. It isn't weakness. It's an extremely well-trained nervous system doing exactly what it was taught to do. Put these three pieces together: the brain that treats social rejection as physical pain, the bias that makes your every reaction be read through an already closed lens, and the body conditioned to go on high alert before anything even happens. And you finally have a complete explanation for something you've lived your whole life without words for. You aren't dramatic. You aren't weak. You aren't, as you've been told so many times, too sensitive for your own good. You are a person whose body and mind learned, with great efficiency, to survive inside a system that never had room for your whole self. Now comes the part I need to tell you with honesty, because it would be easy to stop here and leave you with a comfortable explanation. But understanding the mechanism isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a much harder choice. Because once you understand that your role was assigned, not chosen, a question arises that no one wants to ask out loud. Now, what do I do with this? The easiest answer, the one most people choose without even realizing they're choosing it, is to keep going. Keep playing the role. Keep policing yourself before stepping into the room. Keep small enough not to bother anyone, available enough not to be accused of abandonment, but never whole enough to truly be seen. This option feels safe. It maintains the bond, even if that bond costs a piece of you with every visit. The other option is much more expensive. It's to stop doing the invisible work of keeping the family comfortable at your own expense. It's to stop absorbing tension that isn't yours. And here is the part no one warns you about. This will not be received as freedom by the people around you. It will be received as betrayal. Because remember the body that needs a place to put what it can't digest? When that place stops accepting it, the entire system feels the imbalance. Not because you did anything wrong, but because for the first time in a long time, no one is absorbing the tension for them anymore. And a system that is used to discharging onto someone, when that someone stops accepting the load, doesn't say thank you for taking care of yourself. It says, you've changed. You've grown distant. You're selfish now. That is the price. And I'm not going to fool you by saying it's small. Individuating from a role given to you in childhood often means losing the only kind of closeness you've ever known, even if it was a conditional closeness, even if it was a closeness that hurt more than it warmed. Because for someone who grew up having to earn their place, even a painful bond is better than no bond at all. And that is precisely why so many people prefer to keep carrying the weight rather than risk the possibility of being completely alone. And this is where things get darker than they seem at first glance. Because it isn't just the family that resists your change. It's you too. There is a part of you, trained for decades, that knows exactly how to feel guilty when you start protecting yourself. An inner voice that sounds exactly like the voice you heard so many times at the table. Except now it lives inside you, and it continues the work even when no one else is in the room to do it from the outside. This means that stepping out of this role isn't a single event, a decision you make on a Tuesday, and that's it. It's a repeated, almost daily process of noticing the guilt arriving and choosing, anyway, not to shrink back down to fit. And every time you make that choice, an old part of you screams that you're doing something wrong. Because for years, shrinking was the only thing that worked to keep you inside the circle. But here is what no one tells you about this process. The very sensitivity that made you the target is the same sensitivity that one day will allow you to build something completely different. People who carried this role during childhood are usually, decades later, the first to name out loud what the entire family preferred to keep silent for generations. The first to seek therapy, the first to break a pattern that had been repeating for so long that no one even noticed it was a pattern anymore. And that is precisely where the story gets even more complicated than it looks from the outside. Because breaking the cycle will not bring you the recognition you secretly hoped for. Many times, breaking the cycle means doing the hardest work of your life, alone, with no one to applaud you at the end. There is something that happens almost every time someone decides to stop playing this role, and it's worth preparing you for it, because it usually catches people by surprise. At first, the family reacts with confusion, then with irritation. And if the distance continues, the next reaction is usually rewriting the entire story. Suddenly, you're no longer the person who spent their life policing themselves to fit into a space that was far too tight. You become the cold person, the one who abandoned everyone, the one who was always complicated anyway, and now got worse. The narrative adjusts to protect the system, not to protect the truth. And that hurts in a particular way, because it's almost like watching someone rewrite your own biography in front of you, without having any power to stop it. If this has already happened to you, I need to tell you something with all the clarity I can muster. This rewrite is not proof that you did something wrong. It is proof that the system is doing exactly what systems do when they lose the piece that absorbed tension for them. It's not about your guilt. It's about the collective inability to face what has always been dumped on your shoulders. And there is a question that usually appears at this point in the journey, generally during some quiet late night. Should I simply accept my role, since disagreeing with it costs so much? The honest answer is that there is no right answer here. There are people who choose to maintain the bond, consciously accepting the price it claims, because closeness, even imperfect, is still worth more to them than distance. And there are people who choose to walk away, accepting the grief of a family that may never recognize what it did. Neither option is weakness. Both require a different kind of courage. What isn't sustainable is the third option, the one most of us try first. Staying inside the system, exactly as you've always been, but secretly on the inside, stopping believing in the story they told you about who you are. This split, body present, truth hidden, is what wears you down the most over time. Because you're no longer just carrying the weight you were given. You're carrying the weight, plus the extra effort of pretending you don't know it was never yours. So let me tell you, with the honesty this topic deserves, what this video is not. This isn't about you becoming a healed person who finally learned to stand up for themselves at the dinner table. It's about understanding that the version of you that always felt too much, that always noticed the tension before everyone else, that was always called complicated for saying out loud what others preferred to ignore. That version was never your family's problem. It was just the part of the family that refused to lie. You don't need to fix your sensitivity. You don't need to learn to let it go faster, nor train a more convincing smile for the next gathering. What you need is to stop treating as a personal flaw what was actually, all along, an intelligent response to an environment that didn't know how to deal with its own truth. Perhaps the question you should be asking yourself is no longer, "Why am I like this?" Perhaps the question is different. How much longer am I going to keep carrying a weight that was never mine, just because no one else had the courage to hold it? I'm not going to tell you what to do with that question. This isn't a video of steps, formulas, or do this in 5 days and your family will see you differently. They won't. Maybe they never will. And maybe that is the hardest part to accept, that the recognition you waited a lifetime for might never come from where you always hoped it would. But there is a massive difference between living in expectation of that recognition and living free from the need for it. And it is in that distance, quiet and undramatic, that your life truly begins to change. If you made it this far, some part of this video touched on something you've carried for a long time without words to describe it. If that was the case, leave a like, and if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, this is a good time to join this conversation that we build every week. And I want to ask you for something in the comments. Not an opinion about the video, a sentence about you. Write down below, "I was not the problem." Just that. No explanation, no justification. Just the sentence, however it fits in you right now. And if this conversation stirred something up, there's another video here on the channel that walks right into the next step of this story, about what happens when the person who always absorbed everyone else's pain starts, for the first time, to ask themselves whose pain it is that they are carrying. It's waiting for you right there.